Okay, I'm here today with Dr. Jessica Metcalf, and she's visiting us from Victoria, BC today. And I had the pleasure of hearing her present to my CEO group just a few moments ago, and I thought, there's some really, really important takeaways here that I'd like her to share with us today. So, Jessica, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in this place of speaking about burnout.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me today. This was years ago, and I initially started lecturing how a patient can improve their quality of life post-cancer therapy. And at the same time that was happening, I was initially diagnosed with burnout, clinical depression, and a generalized anxiety disorder.
Oh, wow.
And at the time I was one of the youngest education directors at Princess Margaret Cancer Center. And so I was doing all the things, and to me it didn't make sense. But what I didn't like is I felt as if I was becoming a number in other statistics because dentistry has high suicide rates to begin with. So that then turned into, how can the clinician improve their quality of life from a personal perspective as well as from a business perspective? And what I started to recognize is that these topics are universal. And so the topics around leadership development and workplace culture and navigating burnout as an entity became really important to have conversations around. And a lot of people throw burnout around and don't dive into the actual difficult conversation around it when it can be really challenging to talk about. And so from there, it started to open up to other organizations who reached out to me and said, hey, can you come and speak on the topic? You explain it really well. And I was like, okay, sounds good.
Yeah, okay, so that's how long have you been a speaker and having these sorts of conversations?
Yeah, so I've been a
people?
speaker close to a decade now.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's been absolutely fantastic. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I just had the pleasure, as did my CEO group, as I mentioned, hearing Jessica speak to our group this morning. And one of my members, Brian Rooney, he said, I've been a tech member for 10 years, and I've never heard anybody speak about burnout before. So that was awesome to hear. I know, like a couple of the other members in the group shared, and myself, I suffered from burnout a couple of times in my career and never really understood much about it. Although one of those occasions, I got back from Australia and I did take 4 months off, and I skied for 4 months, and that really helped to set me up for launching my new career as a Tech Canada chair.
Yeah.
So tell me about what are some of the triggers and what are some of the things that we can look out for before we get to the point of having gone too far. What are some of the triggers? What are some of the things that we can be aware of to identify prospective burnout coming on?
Great question. So when it comes to the high achiever in general, we tend to set extremely high expectations for ourselves and what that looks like both from work and our personal life. And so what I like to teach and how to start is how you choose to speak to yourself first and what that looks like. So the way that I like to choose the comparisons is your inner gremlin trying to convince you and tears you down and convinces you that you have to be working a mile a minute all the time? Or is it your inner champion who's coming in, who supports you through those dark moments in life, who provides you with that self-compassion? And at times we may confuse our inner champion, just like we had the conversation today, where we think that voice is trying to motivate us and trying to push us beyond our limits, when in fact it can be harmful to our self and to our being, whether it's sleepless nights, pushing ourselves not just months at a time but years at a time, and what that looks like. And so when we understand how we choose to speak to ourselves, that gives us an understanding of how do we evaluate our own expectations that we have on ourselves. And then we get to start to whittle down, okay, you can still have that massive goal and work towards it, but it doesn't have to happen tomorrow or yesterday.
Yeah.
It's going to take time.
After.
Yeah, maybe the day after, exactly, maybe the day after. But we've got to give ourselves that patience, that grace to recognize as that high achiever, we're going to get there. We are going to get there. There's going to be life that happens, and then there's going to be work that happens as well.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's really helpful to understand some of those things to look out for. You shared with us today about this concept of the cup.
Yes.
You know, and we keep throwing all this stuff in the cup, and then when the cup gets over full,
Yeah.
or a container it was, and we can't even get the lid on anymore, it's too late.
Yes.
So we've got to be able to identify these things as they're accumulating, so we can prevent. So tell us how do we empty the container?
Yes.
What's that process look like?
So first we have to understand what goes in the container first. If you don't know what goes into the container, ask yourself what is on your plate right now. Not necessarily the things that stress you out, but in addition to what is in your life at this moment in time, whether it's parenting or taking your kids to soccer practice or building a business or taxes because we're heading into tax season. Whatever it looks like, what goes into that container. Then you have to learn how to start to create valves. So it may not be that you take anything out of it, but you create enough space so then you have the capacity to be able to work around it and to then be able to add new stuff into it when new stuff happens, because we know life keeps on happening. So when you create valves, it gives you an understanding of how to start to relieve that pressure. What things are true anxious moments or true anxious things or stressors, and what are items that can be put on the back burner that don't stress out but come up every once in a while. So when you create check-in points for yourself, whether that's implementing boundaries, resetting your expectations, understanding when and where you need rest for yourself, those are the things that start to give you the opportunity to open a valve to release the pressure.
Wow, okay. I better get some valves on some of those containers and open a few of those valves.
Yes.
Wow, that's it just helps to put a framework around it.
Yes.
And I love the visualizations
Thank
that
you.
you use around that, so that's really helpful. For those of you that are interested in learning more, how do they get a hold of you?
You can check us out at www.skyl.ca, or you can email me at jm@skill.ca.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much,
Thank
Jessica.
you.
That was
Thank you
fantastic.
so much for having me.
Okay.